In the heart of a bustling city, where streets buzzed with life and stories unfolded at every corner, lived a young woman named Tasha. She wasn't your typical college student. During the day, she attended lectures and scribbled notes in her worn-out notebook, blending into the crowd like any other 20-something trying to make it through life. But when night fell, Tasha transformed. She became a mentor, a teacher, and a warrior, all rolled into one. For years, Tasha had trained in martial arts. It wasn't just a hobby for her, it was her lifeline. Growing up in a rough neighborhood, she learned early on that the world could be unpredictable. Her father, a mechanic who worked long hours, couldn't always protect her from the dangers lurking around their block. So, at the age of 14, Tasha started taking self-defense classes. Over time, she mastered techniques most people only saw in movies: swift kicks, precise strikes, and moves that required both strength and strategy. By the time she turned 22, she'd become an expert in Jeet Kune Do and Krav Maga, two disciplines known for their practicality and efficiency in real-life situations. Despite her skills, Tasha carried herself with humility. She didn't walk around flexing her muscles or boasting about what she could do. Instead, she focused on teaching others, especially women and girls, how to defend themselves. Every evening after finishing her studies, she headed to a small community center, tucked away in a quiet part of town. There, she ran free self-defense workshops, sharing not only techniques but also wisdom about staying calm under pressure. To those who knew her, Tasha was a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in tough times, there's always a way to rise above. One Friday afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, Tasha left campus in her old car. It wasn't much to look at, with scratches on the bumper and a faint smell of oil lingering inside. But it got her where she needed to go. As she drove down a busy street lined with shops and food stalls, she noticed a flickering red light behind her. A police cruiser pulled up close, its siren blaring softly before falling silent. Tasha's stomach tightened. She hadn't done anything wrong, or so she thought. Slowing down, she pulled over to the side of the road, making sure to signal properly. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as she waited for the officer to approach. Through her rearview mirror, she watched him step out of his vehicle, adjusting his belt and hat. He moved slowly, deliberately, as if he owned the road. "License and registration?" the officer said gruffly, leaning toward her window. His tone wasn't friendly. It was sharp, almost dismissive. Tasha nodded politely, reaching into her glove compartment to retrieve the documents. She handed them over without hesitation, her eyes steady despite the unease creeping into her chest. The officer glanced at the papers, then back at her. "You know why I pulled you over?" he asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "No, sir," Tasha replied calmly. "I wasn't speeding and I followed all traffic rules." He smirked, tapping his flashlight against his palm. "Your taillight's busted. You should have checked that before hitting the road." Tasha felt a pang of frustration. The car wasn't hers, it belonged to her uncle, who had lent it to her while hers was in the shop. Still, she kept her cool. "Thank you for letting me know. I'll get it fixed right away." But instead of ending the conversation there, the officer leaned closer, his demeanor shifting. His partner, another officer sitting in the cruiser, looked on silently. "You seem like a smart girl," the first officer said, his tone now playful but laced with something darker. "Maybe you need a little lesson in discipline." Before Tasha could react, he raised his hand and delivered a sharp spank to her lower back, right near her hip. Time seemed to freeze. Tasha's breath caught in her throat. For a split second, every instinct screamed at her to retaliate, to twist his arm, pin him down, or disarm him completely. Years of training had prepared her for moments like this, and she knew exactly how to take control. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the shock, or maybe it was the realization that reacting violently would only escalate things. Whatever it was, she stayed still, her face unreadable. The officer chuckled, clearly amused by his own actions. "That ought to teach you," he said, stepping back. "Now fix that light and drive safe." Tasha bit her tongue, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her anger. She nodded curtly, took her documents, and drove off as soon as he waved her away. Her mind raced with questions. Why did he feel entitled to treat her that way? What gave him the confidence to humiliate her in public? And most importantly, why did no one speak up? Unbeknownst to Tasha, a security camera mounted above a nearby store had captured the entire incident. Within hours, the footage found its way online. Someone posted it on social media, adding captions that highlighted the absurdity of the situation. Comments poured in, ranging from outrage to disbelief. Some viewers criticized the officer's behavior, calling it unprofessional and abusive. Others joked about it, poking fun at the irony of messing with someone who looked so composed and potentially dangerous. As the video gained traction, speculation grew. Clips surfaced of Tasha teaching martial arts, showcasing her speed, precision, and power. People began wondering aloud whether she could have easily taken down the officer if she wanted to. Memes popped up, imagining scenarios where she flipped the tables on him mid-spank. The hashtag, Who Hurt Tasha, trended nationwide, turning the Yao incident into both a serious discussion about police conduct and a bizarre internet sensation. Meanwhile, Tasha remained oblivious to the storm brewing online. She returned home, parked the car, and sat quietly in her room, replaying the moment in her head. She felt violated, disrespected, and angry, but not defeated. Deep down, she knew this wasn't just about her. It was about countless others who had faced similar treatment and been silenced. Something had to change. Unbeknownst to her, the next chapter of her story was already unfolding, one that would thrust her into the spotlight and challenge everything she thought she knew about. Justice, courage, and resilience. The next morning, Tasha woke up to a flurry of notifications on her phone. Her friends and family had bombarded her with messages, urging her to check social media. At first, she ignored them. She wasn't in the mood for distractions, but curiosity got the better of her, and when she finally opened her Instagram feed, she froze. There it was, the video of the traffic stop. Someone had uploaded it online, and it had already gone viral. The clip showed everything: the officer's smirk, the Spank, and Tasha's stoic reaction. Comments flooded the screen. Some people were furious, calling out the officer for his blatant abuse of power. Others made jokes about how he probably didn't realize who he was messing with. A few even speculated that Tasha could have easily flipped the script if she'd wanted to. Tasha felt a mix of emotions: anger, embarrassment, but also a strange sense of validation. She hadn't imagined the incident would blow up like this. For years, she'd heard stories from friends and neighbors about similar encounters with law enforcement, moments where they felt powerless and unseen. Now, here she was, at the center of a national conversation. It was overwhelming, to say the least. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was her best friend, Mia. "Tasha, have you seen this?" Mia asked, her voice a mix of concern and excitement. "People are talking about you everywhere. You're trending." "I don't want this," Tasha replied, rubbing her temples. "I just want to move past it." "But you can't ignore it," Mia insisted. "This isn't just about you anymore. People are using your story to talk about bigger issues. You should say something." Tasha hesitated. She wasn't the type to seek attention or drama. She preferred staying behind the scenes, quietly doing her work and helping others without fanfare. But Mia had a point. If she stayed silent, the narrative might spiral out of control. And worse, it could send the wrong message: that victims should remain quiet instead of standing up for themselves. Reluctantly, Tasha agreed to give an interview. She reached out to a local journalist she trusted, someone known for covering grassroots movements and underrepresented voices. They met at a small cafe near campus, where Tasha recounted the events of that evening in detail. She spoke calmly, but firmly, emphasizing not just what happened but why it mattered. "It wasn't just about the slap," she explained, her hands clasped tightly around a cup of tea. "It was about the disrespect, the assumption that I wouldn't or couldn't stand up for myself. That's something so many people face every day, especially women and minorities. We're told to stay quiet, to let things slide because It's not worth the trouble. But enough is enough. Her words resonated deeply with viewers. Clips from the interview spread quickly, turning Tasha into an accidental activist. People praised her composure and strength, marveling at how she chose restraint over retaliation. Meanwhile, old videos of her martial arts classes resurfaced online, showing her teaching self-defense techniques to groups of young women. The internet couldn't get enough of her, this unassuming college student who could have easily taken down a grown man but chose not to. As the days passed, the pressure mounted on the police department. Calls for accountability grew louder, with petitions demanding disciplinary action against the officer involved. Protesters gathered outside the precinct, holding signs that read, "Respect is not optional," and "Justice for Tasha." Local news outlets covered the protests extensively, amplifying the voices of those calling for change. But not everyone was supportive. Some critics dismissed the incident as trivial, arguing that it was just a joke and accusing Tasha of overreacting. One radio host even joked during his show, maybe she liked it. The comment sparked outrage, leading to boycotts of his program and further fueling the movement. Amidst all the chaos, one person found himself caught between loyalty and morality, the second officer who had been present during the traffic stop. Unlike his partner, he hadn't laughed or joined in on the prank. In fact, he'd felt uneasy about the whole thing from the start. But in the heat of the moment, he hadn't spoken up. Now, as the backlash intensified, guilt gnawed at him. Late. One night, after another long shift, he sat alone in his car, staring at the dashboard. He thought about his own daughter, barely older than Tasha, and how he'd feel if someone treated her the way his partner had treated that young woman. It wasn't right. He knew it wasn't right. And yet, he'd stood there, silent, letting it happen. Finally, he made a decision. The next morning, he walked into the Internal Affairs office and requested a private meeting. Sitting across from the investigator, he took a deep breath and began recounting what had transpired that evening. He admitted that his partner had a history of inappropriate behavior, citing past complaints filed by other civilians. He also shared details about the culture within their unit, a culture that often turned a blind eye to misconduct, especially when it came to minor infractions. His testimony became a turning point in the case. Armed with new evidence, investigators launched a formal inquiry into the officer's conduct. Meanwhile, the department announced that both officers had been placed on administrative leave, pending the outcome of the investigation. For Tasha, the mounting scrutiny brought mixed feelings. On one hand, she was relieved to see people rallying behind her cause. On the other hand, she hated being in the spotlight. Every knock on her door, every notification on her phone, reminded her of the violation she'd endured. She tried to focus on her routine, attending classes, teaching her workshops, but it was hard to shake off the weight of public opinion. One evening, after a particularly draining day, she decided to take a walk. The air was crisp and the streets were quiet, offering a rare moment of peace. As she strolled through her neighborhood, she noticed a group of kids playing basketball at a nearby court. Their laughter echoed in the cool night breeze, a reminder of simpler times. She paused for a moment, watching them. These were the kinds of moments she fought for. The freedom to live without fear, to laugh without looking over your shoulder. Her mind drifted back to her own childhood, when she'd first realized the importance of standing up for herself. Back then, she didn't have anyone to teach her how to fight, not physically anyway. That's why she'd made it her mission, to help others learn those skills. Lost in thought, she didn't notice the figure approaching her until he cleared his throat. It was the second officer, the one who hadn't said anything during the traffic stop. He looked nervous, fidgeting with his cap as he stood a few feet away. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice low and hesitant. Tasha stiffened, unsure of what to expect. Part of her wanted to walk away, to avoid any further confrontation. But another part, the curious, compassionate part, nodded slowly. They sat together on a bench, the silence between them heavy, but not hostile. After a long pause, the officer spoke. I wanted to apologize, he began, his words stumbling out awkwardly. What happened that night? It wasn't okay. I should have said something, done something. I'm sorry. Tasha studied him carefully, searching for sincerity in his expression. She didn't respond immediately, letting the weight of his apology sink in. Finally, she nodded. Thank you for saying that, she said softly. Apologies matter, but actions matter more. He nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. I testified, he admitted. I told them everything I knew. About that night and about other things. Tasha's eyes widened slightly, surprised by his admission. Why? Because I realized I couldn't keep pretending it's not my problem, he replied. If I don't stand up now, who will? For the first time since the incident, Tasha felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this wasn't just about justice for her. It was about creating a ripple effect, inspiring others to speak out and demand better. As the officer stood to leave, she called out to him. Thank you, she said simply, for doing the right thing. As he walked away, Tasha stared at the horizon, where the last traces of daylight lingered. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to fight not with fists but with courage, resilience, and the belief that change was possible. The days that followed were a whirlwind for Tasha. Her interview had struck a chord with people across the country, and suddenly, she was everywhere, on TV shows, podcasts, and even in newspaper articles. Reporters wanted to know more about her story, her background, and her thoughts on what needed to change. At first, it felt surreal. Here she was, just a regular college student who taught self-defense on the side, now thrust into the national spotlight. But Tasha didn't let the attention go to her head. Instead, she used it as an opportunity to speak out, not just for herself but for others who couldn't. Every time she appeared on a show or gave an interview, she made sure to bring the conversation back to the bigger picture: respect, accountability, and systemic issues within law enforcement. She wasn't interested in revenge or drama. She wanted real, meaningful change. One morning, after appearing on a popular morning talk show, Tasha received a message from one of her students, a young woman named Maya. Maya had been part of Tasha's free self-defense classes for months, and over time she'd opened up about her own struggles with harassment at school and on public transport. In her message, Maya wrote, "You've inspired me to keep fighting. Seeing you stand up like this makes me feel braver too." Tasha smiled as she read the words. That was exactly why she did what she did, to empower others. It wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about showing people that they didn't have to stay silent. They could rise above no matter how hard things got. Despite the growing support, not everyone was happy about Tasha's newfound platform. The officer involved in the traffic stop, the one who had spanked her, was furious. He claimed the incident was blown out of proportion and accused Tasha of exaggerating the situation to gain sympathy. To make matters worse, he filed a lawsuit against her, alleging emotional distress and defamation. His lawyer argued that Tasha's calm demeanor during interviews implied a threat, suggesting she might retaliate physically despite never doing so. The news of the lawsuit spread quickly, sparking outrage online. Many saw it as yet another example of power being misused to silence victims. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse where the case would eventually be heard, holding signs that read, "Accountability over abuse," and "Stop victim blaming." Tasha, however, refused to let the lawsuit intimidate her. When asked about it during an interview, she responded with quiet confidence. "He can sue me all he wants," she said, her voice steady. "But no amount of legal action will erase the truth. What happened wasn't okay, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. My choice to remain calm doesn't mean I condoned his behavior. It means I chose dignity over violence." Her response resonated deeply with viewers. People admired her ability to stay composed under pressure, especially when faced with such blatant attempts to discredit her. Even those who weren't familiar with martial arts began to see Tasha as a symbol of strength, not because of her physical skills, but because of her mental fortitude. Meanwhile, the second officer, the one who had apologized to Tasha, continued to cooperate with investigators. His testimony revealed troubling patterns within the department. Internal records showed multiple complaints against the offending officer, ranging from inappropriate comments to outright aggression. Yet, none of these complaints had led to serious consequences. The department had brushed them off as isolated, incidents chalking them up to personality clashes rather than systemic issues. This revelation only fueled public anger. Activists pointed out that cases like Tasha's were far from rare. They were symptoms of a much larger problem. Social media campaigns urging police reform gained momentum, with hashtags like Respect and Reform trending alongside Justice for Tasha. Community leaders called for town hall meetings to discuss ways to hold officers accountable while fostering better relationships between law enforcement and civilians. Back at the precinct, tensions ran high. Officers who had previously turned a blind eye to misconduct now found themselves questioning their roles in perpetuating harmful behaviors. Some defended their colleague, insisting that the backlash was unfair. Others quietly admitted that change was long overdue. The atmosphere was tense, divided, and uncertain. Amidst all the chaos, Tasha decided to focus on what mattered most: her community. She poured her energy into expanding her self-defense program, turning it into something bigger than ever before. With donations pouring in from supporters nationwide, she rented a larger space and hired assistants to help run the classes. Soon, the program wasn't just about teaching physical techniques. It became a safe haven for women and girls to share their stories, build confidence, and find solidarity. Every evening, the dojo buzzed with activity. Women of all ages came together, some seeking protection, others looking for empowerment. Tasha welcomed each of them warmly, reminding them that self-defense wasn't just about punches and kicks. It was about mindset. Strength isn't just physical, she often said during sessions. It's about knowing your worth and standing firm in it no matter what life throws at you. One particular student stood out to Tasha, a shy teenager named Layla. Layla rarely spoke during class, keeping her head down and avoiding eye contact. But Tasha noticed how diligently she practiced the moves, how focused she was despite her quiet demeanor. After a few weeks, Tasha pulled her aside after class. "How are you finding the sessions?" Tasha asked gently. Layla hesitated before answering. "They're good," she said softly. I don't know if I'll ever be brave enough to use them." Tasha nodded, understanding completely. "Bravery isn't about not feeling scared," she explained. "It's about doing what needs to be done, even when you are scared. Trust. Hey, I've been there." Layla looked up, meeting Tasha's gaze for the first time. "Do you think I can do it?" "I know you can," Tasha replied with a reassuring smile. "You're stronger than you realize." As the weeks went by, Layla began to open up more. She started participating in group discussions, sharing snippets of her own experiences with bullying at school. Watching her transformation filled Tasha with pride. This was why she kept going, because moments like these reminded her that every effort counted, no matter how small it seemed. While Tasha worked tirelessly to uplift her community, the investigation into the officer's conduct reached its final stages. Investigators reviewed testimonies, examined evidence, and consulted legal experts. Finally, after months of deliberation, they announced their findings. The officer would face charges of assault and misconduct. Additionally, the department pledged to implement stricter policies regarding officer behavior, including mandatory training on cultural sensitivity and de-escalation techniques. When Tasha heard the news, she allowed herself a brief moment of relief. Justice hadn't come easily, but it had come, and that was something to celebrate. Still, she knew the fight wasn't over. Holding one person accountable wouldn't fix everything. Real change required consistent effort, both from individuals and institutions. That evening, as she locked up the dojo after another successful session, Tasha paused to reflect. She thought about how far she'd come since that fateful night. The sleepless nights, the endless interviews, the weight of expectations. It hadn't been easy, but she'd stayed true to herself. and in doing so, she'd inspired countless others to do the same. As she walked home under the glow of streetlights, Tasha felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would still have challenges, but she was ready to keep teaching, keep speaking out, and keep pushing for a world where everyone could live without fear. For Tasha, strength wasn't just about defending yourself, it was about lifting others up, creating spaces where courage could flourish, and proving that even in the darkest moments, light could shine through. The charges against the officer marked a turning point, not just for Tasha, but for the entire community. News of his arrest spread quickly, igniting conversations in homes, workplaces, and schools. People debated what justice truly meant. Was it enough to punish one person, or did the system itself need to change? For Tasha, the answer was clear. Accountability was important, but it couldn't stop there. Real progress required deeper work, education, empathy, and action. In the weeks following the announcement, Tasha threw herself into her mission with even more determination. Her dojo became a hub of activity, not just for martial arts training, but also for workshops on personal empowerment, conflict resolution, and mental resilience. She invited guest speakers, community leaders, counselors, and activists to share their expertise. The sessions were open to everyone, regardless of age, gender, or background. People came from all over the city, eager to learn and connect. One Saturday morning, as sunlight streamed through the windows of the dojo, Tasha stood at the front of the room addressing a packed crowd. "This space isn't just about learning how to throw a punch," she began, her voice warm yet firm. "It's about understanding your value, knowing that you deserve respect, and having the tools to demand it when others forget." Her words resonated deeply with those in attendance. Many nodded along while others scribbled notes in journals. Among them was an older woman named Clara, who had recently joined the program after hearing about it from her granddaughter. Clara had never considered taking self-defense classes before, but something about Tasha's story inspired her to give it a try. Now, she found herself not only learning practical skills, but also rediscovering her own strength. After the session ended, Clara approached Tasha. "I wanted to thank you," she said, her eyes glistening with emotion. "I thought I was too old to start something like this, but now I feel alive again, like I can handle whatever comes my way." Tasha smiled, touched by the sincerity in Clara's voice. "That's exactly why we're here," she replied. "Strength isn't limited by age or anything else. It's inside you. It always has been." As word of mouth spread, the dojo grew busier than ever. Donations poured in, allowing Tasha to expand the program further. She hired additional instructors, many of whom were former students, and introduced new classes tailored to different groups: young children, seniors, and even men who wanted to support the cause. Each class carried the same message: respect starts with us, and it ripples outward. Meanwhile, Tasha continued to speak out publicly, using her platform to advocate for broader reforms. She attended town hall meetings, sharing her experiences, and urging policymakers to listen to marginalized voices. She emphasized the importance of training officers in de-escalation techniques and fostering trust between law enforcement and the communities they served. Her calm demeanor and thoughtful insights earned her respect across political lines, making her a unifying figure in a divisive conversation. But not everyone appreciated her efforts. Some critics dismissed her as naive, claiming she didn't understand the complexities of policing. Others accused her of exploiting her situation for attention. Tasha brushed off the negativity, focusing instead on the people who mattered, the ones showing up day after day, ready to learn and grow. One evening, as she prepared to leave the dojo, Tasha received an unexpected visitor. It was the second officer, the one who had apologized to her months earlier. He stood hesitantly near the entrance, looking unsure of whether he should stay or go. When Tasha spotted him, she walked over, her expression neutral. "Can I help you?" she asked. Politely. He shifted uncomfortably, clutching a small envelope in his hands. I wanted to say thank you," he said quietly, "for everything. You've inspired me to be better, not just as an officer, but as a person." Tasha studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Apologies are a start," she said. "But Actions matter more. What will you do next? He swallowed hard, clearly moved by her question. I've requested a transfer to the community outreach unit, he admitted. I want to rebuild trust where it's been broken, to show people that not all cops are bad, that some of us genuinely care. Tasha's expression softened slightly. That takes courage, she acknowledged. Keep going. Keep listening. That's how real change happens. Before leaving, the officer handed her the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter expressing his gratitude and commitment to doing better. As she read it later that night, Tasha felt a glimmer of hope. Change wasn't easy, but moments like these reminded her that it was possible. Despite the progress, challenges remained. Not every interaction went smoothly. One afternoon, a group of rowdy teenagers loitered outside the dojo, mocking the women coming and going. They catcalled and made crude jokes, clearly trying to provoke a reaction. Several students hesitated to enter, intimidated by the commotion. Tasha stepped outside, her presence commanding yet calm. Is there a problem? She asked, her tone steady. One of the teens smirked, stepping forward. Nah, just wondering what y'all are doing in there. Learning how to fight? Bet you couldn't take me on. Instead of engaging, Tasha extended an invitation. Why don't you come inside and see for yourself? She suggested. We teach more than fighting. We teach confidence, discipline, and respect. The teen scoffed, clearly skeptical. Yeah, right. Like you'd actually let us in. We would, Tasha replied simply. No strings attached, just give it a try. To her surprise, the boy hesitated. His friends nudged him, egging him on, but he seemed intrigued. Finally, he shrugged. Fine. But if this is some kind of trick? It's not, Tasha assured him. Just come in and see. That evening, the group reluctantly joined the Ayaza class. At first, they acted tough, cracking jokes and refusing to take things seriously. But as the session progressed, their attitudes began to shift. They watched in awe as Tasha demonstrated techniques with precision and grace. When it was their turn to practice, they stumbled at first, laughing nervously, but slowly they started to focus, realizing that mastering a move required effort and patience. By the end of the session, the teens were sweating but smiling. One of them, a lanky kid with a mop of unruly hair, approached Tasha. You weren't kidding, he admitted. This stuff's harder than it looks. She grinned. That's the point. It's not about winning fights. It's about respecting yourself and others. Stick around and you'll get the hang of it. Weeks later, the group returned regularly, becoming some of the dojo's most dedicated participants. Their transformation amazed everyone, including themselves. They weren't just learning self-defense, they were finding purpose. As time passed, Tasha's influence reached farther than she could have imagined. Schools invited her to speak at assemblies. Businesses asked her to lead team building. Workshops and nonprofits sought her guidance on empowering underserved communities. Yet, despite her growing fame, she remained grounded. She still taught classes daily, insisting that her true impact happened on the mats, face-to-face with her students. One evening, as she sat on the rooftop of the dojo watching the sunset, Tasha reflected on how far she'd come. From a quiet college student navigating a difficult neighborhood to a national figure advocating for justice and empowerment, her journey had been anything but ordinary. But through it all, she stayed true to her core values: humility, compassion, and resilience. Her phone buzzed, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Mia, her best friend. Guess what? Your story's trending again. People love you. Tasha chuckled softly, shaking her head. Fame wasn't what drove her, it was the knowledge that she was making a difference, one person at a time. As the sky turned shades of orange and pink, she allowed herself a moment of quiet pride. The road ahead would still have obstacles, but she was ready. Ready to keep teaching, keep inspiring, and keep proving that real strength lies not in dominance, but in dignity. And with that, she stood up, stretched, and headed back inside. There was always more work to be done. Months turned into a year, and Tasha's dojo had become more than just a place to learn self-defense. It was a sanctuary, a refuge for people seeking not only physical strength, but also emotional resilience. Every day brought new faces, single, mothers wanting to feel safer walking home at night, teenagers looking for direction, elderly folks reclaiming their confidence. Each person carried their own story, their own struggles, and Tasha welcomed them all with open arms. One crisp autumn afternoon, as golden leaves swirled in the breeze outside the dojo, Tasha stood near the entrance, greeting her students as they arrived. The air buzzed with energy, excited chatter mixed with the rhythmic thud of feet on mats inside. She smiled, watching how the space she'd built had transformed lives, including her own. Among the crowd that day was Layla, the once shy teenager who had blossomed into one of Tasha's most dedicated assistants. Layla now helped lead beginner classes, her voice steady and encouraging as she guided newcomers through basic moves. Seeing her teach filled Tasha with pride, not because Layla was perfect, but because she'd overcome so much to get there. Her journey reminded Tasha of why she kept going, even when things got tough. As the session wrapped up, Tasha gathered everyone in a circle for a quick debrief. "Remember," she said, her tone light but sincere, "self-defense isn't just about protecting yourself physically. It's about setting boundaries, speaking up, and knowing your worth. Those are skills you can use every single day." The group nodded, some clapping softly in agreement. One woman raised her hand hesitantly. "Can I say something?" she asked, glancing around nervously. "Of course," Tasha replied, smiling warmly. I wanted to thank you," the woman continued, her voice trembling slightly. "Before I came here, I didn't think I could stand up for myself, but now, I feel like I have tools, like I'm stronger than I thought." Her words sparked a ripple effect. Others began sharing their own experiences, how the program had given them courage, taught them patience, or simply provided a safe space to belong. By the time the session ended, tears glistened in several pairs of eyes, including Tasha's. That evening, after locking up the dojo, Tasha took a long walk through the neighborhood. The streets were quieter now, bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. She often used this time to reflect, letting her thoughts wander freely without interruptions. Tonight, however, her mind kept circling back to one question. Had it been worth it? The past year hadn't been easy. Between media appearances, legal battles, and running the dojo, she'd sacrificed sleep, personal time, and sometimes even peace of mind. There were moments when doubt crept in, when the weight of expectations felt suffocating. But then she'd remember stories like Layla's, or Clara's, or the countless others whose lives had changed because of what she'd built. And in those moments, the answer became clear. She paused beneath a lamppost, pulling out her phone to check messages. Among them was an update from the police department. The offending officer's trial had concluded, and he'd been found guilty of assault and misconduct. While his punishment wouldn't undo the harm he'd caused, it sent a powerful message. Accountability mattered. Justice wasn't always swift or perfect, but it existed, and fighting for it was worthwhile. Tasha scrolled further and found another message, one she hadn't expected. It was from the second officer, the one who had apologized months ago. He wrote briefly but sincerely, "I saw the verdict. Thank you for helping me see the bigger picture. I'm doing my best to make amends." Her heart warmed slightly. People weren't static. They could grow and change if given the chance. That belief was at the core of everything she did. Whether teaching martial arts or advocating for reform, everyone deserved opportunities to do better. A few days later, Tasha received an invitation to speak at a national conference focused on community empowerment. At first, she hesitated. Public speaking still made her nervous, especially in front of large audiences. But Mia, ever the cheerleader, convinced her to accept. "This is your moment," Mia insisted. "You've worked so hard for this. Don't let fear hold you back." So, Tasha prepared diligently, crafting her speech carefully. She didn't want to sound rehearsed or overly formal. Instead, she aimed for authenticity, for words that resonated deeply with anyone listening. When the day arrived, She stepped onto the stage, her heart pounding but her resolve unwavering. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady despite the nerves swirling inside. "When I was younger, I never imagined I'd be standing here today. Back then, I was just trying to survive, to navigate a world that often felt unfair and overwhelming. What kept me going was the belief that everyone deserves respect. Everyone deserves safety. And everyone has the power to create change, no matter how small it may seem." She paused, scanning the audience. Faces stared back at her, some curious, others inspired. "People ask me all the time why I stayed calm during that traffic stop, why I didn't fight back. The truth is, I chose restraint, because I believed it would send a stronger message than retaliation ever could. Violence might win battles, but dignity wins hearts." Her words echoed through the auditorium, met with murmurs of agreement. She went on to talk about her dojo, the importance of community, and the need for systemic reforms. By the end of her speech, the room erupted in applause, with many attendees rushing to meet her afterward. One woman approached her, tears streaming down her face. "Your story saved me," she confessed. "I was in a similar situation once, and I didn't know how to react. Hearing you speak gave me hope that maybe I can rise above it too." Tasha hugged her tightly, feeling a lump form in her throat. This was why she did what she did, not for accolades or recognition, but for moments like these. Moments where someone realized they weren't alone. Back home, life returned to its usual rhythm. Tasha continued teaching, mentoring, and pushing for change. The dojo thrived, expanding to include programs for veterans, survivors of domestic violence, and individuals recovering from trauma. Every success fueled her determination to keep growing, to reach even more people. One evening, as she sat on the rooftop again, watching the stars twinkle overhead, Tasha reflected on her journey. From a young girl practicing kicks in her backyard, to a leader inspiring thousands, she'd come a long way. Yet she knew the fight wasn't over. There would always be challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But she also knew she wasn't alone. Countless others stood beside her, ready to push forward together. Her phone buzzed again, breaking the silence. It was a photo message from Mia, a snapshot of a mural recently painted downtown. The image depicted Tasha mid-kick, her figure bold and dynamic against a backdrop of vibrant colors. Beneath it, bold letters spelled out, "Strength through dignity." Tasha smiled, saving the picture to her gallery. It was fitting, not because it celebrated her specifically, but because it captured the spirit of what she stood for. Strength wasn't about domination or aggression. It was about rising above adversity, staying true to yourself and lifting others along the way. As she tucked her phone away and leaned back against the railing, Tasha felt a deep sense of contentment. Life might throw curveballs, but she'd learned to roll with them, to adapt, grow, and emerge stronger each time. Whatever lay ahead, she was ready. After all, real strength wasn't about never falling. It was about getting back up again and again, until you reach the finish line.